Now, I'm somebody who, for most of my life, has loved gaming. I love cartoons. I love media for the most part. And in the modern day, it's very hard to enjoy media, whether it be TV shows, movies, comic books, video games, and there's a very specific reason for this. Well, actually, there are several very specific reasons for this. One is a lack of focus on good storytelling overall and character development. That's being substituted by things like identity politics. Now, I'm not the first person to beat this drum, and I certainly won't be the last, but I wanted to throw my hat in the ring for at least this commentary. Because lately I've been incredibly frustrated with entertainment. I've been trying so hard to enjoy so much of it, but so much of it has been just terrible. You've got things like superhero comics, for instance. The focus isn't on their actual good heroics. The focus is on identity politics, on telling stories surrounded by identity politics. The way that a hero looks, their sexual preferences, and things that don't make for good storytelling. You can add them as character traits, but that's about as far as it should ever go. It's not about telling a good story anymore. It's about the message, as one prolific YouTuber often puts it. It's nauseating, honestly, and frustrating, to say the least. I'm not the type of person who likes to just harp on or jump on a bandwagon just for the sake of jumping on a bandwagon, because there are lots of YouTubers that cover this sort of thing whenever media gets woke, goes broke, so to speak. But it's something that just I can't ignore. I've followed for years. It's just gotten worse and worse over time. And it does feel like the tide is shifting, but it feels like Hollywood and entertainment at large still doesn't understand that this isn't something that people want. This is something being forced down people's throats as something virtuous and good for them. They don't know that it's good for them, but it's good for them, so we're going to keep feeding it to them despite their protests. To the contrary. It's incredibly frustrating for me. As somebody who likes to create content and enjoy entertainment as much as anybody, being constantly told that you have to enjoy something that you don't by people who create things is incredibly nauseating and incredibly frustrating. I don't read comics anymore because all DC and Marvel do is focus on identity politics. They rewrite heroes to suit narratives, classic heroes, heroes who are virtuous, who are known for certain character traits. They strip them of those character traits and replace them with something that should be arbitrary and try to make that into a character trait. And I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm not spending money on comics anymore because they're not doing it. Also, a lot of their art is pretty terrible. The quality has degraded over years. So I usually don't go and buy them anymore. And that's sad because I want to. I want to read good Batman. I want to read good Superman. I want to read good Daredevil and Spider-Man and X-Men and you name it. But you can't do it anymore because the types of people who write that stuff don't care about those characters. They use them as a platform for identity politics and just narcissistic storytelling. It's incredibly frustrating. And I think there's nothing more insulting to me as an African-American man than to constantly be told that I can't identify with a hero or a character unless they look like me. I'm not the first one to say it, but I will say it till I'm blue in the face. I don't need somebody to look like me to identify with them. The very notion of that is insulting to me. How dare anybody assume that I can't understand, empathize with, or even like a character because they don't look like me. It's insulting, but that's the philosophy in modern entertainment. If you're black, like I am, and you see a character on screen, that character has to be as much like you as possible, otherwise you just won't get it. You're an idiot. You're an idiot if you somehow like these characters and they don't look like you. It's ridiculous, but that's basically what they're saying. I can't like Wally West as the Flash unless he's black. That's what they've told me with the Flash TV show. Even though I like the original white-skinned, red-haired Wally West. He had character traits. He had established lore. They threw all of that in the freaking garbage just to give me a wokeified version that aligns with the story they want to tell. Barry Allen is adopted by a black family because that's virtuous, you see. If it was the other way around, it'd be racism. No, if it's like actually me, a black person who was adopted by white people, it would be terrible. It'd be racist. But no. He's adopted by a black family. And he falls in love with his adoptive sister. And gets married to her. That's so messed up to me. That's really twisted. But enough about the Flash. I'll have to talk about that at some other point. If I decide to make more videos like this. I'm going to make more Koopa commentaries, but this is more of a rant for me. It's just so frustrating. Now what you're seeing on the screen is my favorite game of all time, Star Fox 64. This is a game that ever since I was a child I was able to beat from start to finish. And I play through it multiple times a year. It is one of the best games ever made. It's very simple. I know the story from front to back. I'm pretty sure I know most of the dialogue from front to back. I'm not able to 100% it. I can't medal every world, but that's a whole nother discussion. Regardless, it is one of the best pieces of media I think I've ever consumed in my entire life. Nothing made in 2022 can hold a candle to this. Even things that I played that I really like can't hold a candle to this level of quality. It's not just nostalgia for me. I was playing it before I recorded this video to record it, and I immediately went back to my childhood, and the same feelings of exhilaration, excitement, and happiness filled me. And it happens every time I pick up and play this game from start to finish. Not much media can do that today. Not much can compel me like that today. But why was it so good? I mean, graphics obviously aren't much to write home about. It's in the Nintendo 64 era. They were just figuring out 3D at this point. Everything was polygonal and pointy. And things were blurry. But it didn't matter. It looked good for the time, number one. But number two, despite the gameplay being as simplistic as it was, there was a lot of player agency, and even though you were pretty much on rails, there was a story unfolding as you played, a compelling one, just through the character interactions and dialogue. You felt like you were part of this big epic space conflict that was taking place between the Cornerian forces and the forces of Andross. I almost forgot his name, oh my gosh. It's too early in the morning. But you had a simple conflict, and it was taking place, and you felt a sense of urgency to defeat Andross and save this galaxy. It was great. It was fantastic. A lot of games today, you don't even get that. You get more cutscenes than anything else that interrupt your gameplay. This was stuff that was happening during gameplay. You saw dialogue unfolding as you committed certain actions within the game. And it was brilliant. We can't get this experience anymore. The last time we did, they tried to effectively remake this, and they failed because the control scheme was so terrible. Aside from that, I think that Star Fox Zero would have been awesome. Even if it was just a retelling of this game with some different twists and turns, I thought it would have been awesome. I still think it should be reworked and ported to the Switch, but again, another conversation for another day. The point of this video is to say that I'm so saddened. It's hard to even be angry. I'm more saddened and disappointed with the state of entertainment. Because big names, legendary characters and heroes are being just desecrated by people who only have a social agenda. They only have specific worldview that they want to convey to people. And that's all they focus on in their stories. And the stories suffer because of it. It sucks. Even people who don't care about that come back and say, well, gosh, this was boring. The biggest complaint about modern media you will see is that it's boring. It's not compelling in any way, shape, or form. It's boring. Now, you'll see plenty of channels on YouTube that are what are quote-unquote anti-SJW channels. Channels like Nerdrotic and That Star Wars Girl, Yellow Flash, Geeks and Gamers, RK Outpost, Razor Fist, The Quartering, Archcast. I could list a whole bunch of them that I watch. And I've been watching many of their videos for years and years and years. And I've held off of making a video till now because I've seen all the stuff that they get. All the criticism that they get. But I've always agreed with what they've said. Not every single word, of course, and not every bit of criticism of media or even praise of media. Because I don't agree with anybody 110% of the time. But their overall point, I agree with. They're not there just to complain about the current state of media. They're there to criticize the current state of media and to try to encourage the people who make that media, if they happen to watch, to consider changing it. They're being a voice for people who don't have YouTube channels and who see this stuff and are frustrated with the state of media because they don't want to hear what these people have to say in regards to their social agendas, their, you know, social justice politics, their identity politics, and all of these things that take center stage and replace the quality stuff that we know in storytelling. You can tell stories that have a social message, and it used to be done incredibly well. But now it's the center focus, and it's the same messages over and over and over. You gotta race swap characters. You have to have people of different sexual preferences. You have to have, you know, whatever the case might be. It's almost always, you know, left-leaning stuff. It's never anything on the other side of the political spectrum, because those people are evil. You hear it all the time, over and over again. My thing is just, it's getting everything I enjoy is being infiltrated by this stuff ad nauseum. And I don't know what the end goal is. Is the end goal to get me to agree with these people? Because I don't. I don't agree with the way that these people want to go about enacting social change. These things don't exist to enact social change. They're escapism. That's what made them great. You didn't have to worry about social change. Social change was a discussion to be had in a different time and place. It wasn't during somebody's entertainment. And quite frankly, the fact that it's being told in the midst of somebody's entertainment is such a gigantic turnoff, not only to just me, but to such large swaths of people, to the point where there are, as I mentioned before, there are entire channels, many of whom I listed, many of whom you should follow and subscribe to. There are entire channels devoted to criticizing that entire aspect of media in the hopes that it'll change. And failing that, creating their own, which is the other side effect of all of this. But the fact remains is that it's still going on, and it's frustrating. It feels like every week there's a get woke, go broke story. And people are tired of seeing these companies fail because they don't listen to the consumers and what the consumers want. And then to turn around and have the consumers be criticized and called horrible things, being called racist and all sorts of istophobic language, and just criticized with things, accusing people of things that they are objectively not guilty of, but it's an easy criticism to dismiss any legitimate criticism that they may or may not have. It's a way to shut up critics. But people should be allowed to criticize media, just as much as people are allowed to praise media. People want to see both genuine criticism and praise of media. And today's media is in my opinion, worthy of more criticism than praise, because they have yet to change. That's the whole point. The reason that people keep making videos complaining, as some people see it, about this stuff is because it doesn't change. It doesn't stop. It insists upon itself over and over and over and over, and even when it feels like the tide is shifting, it's still not shifting fast enough. And I'm so tired of it, because I want to enjoy things again. I want to enjoy Star Wars again. I want to enjoy Marvel Comics. I want to enjoy DC Comics. I want to enjoy sci-fi again. Star Trek has been ruined beyond repair. Star Wars has been ruined beyond repair. They need to completely scrap what they're doing and rewrite everything. And stop putting emphasis on things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And if you do think they matter, the conversation needs to be had outside of these things. But they're taking advantage of a captive audience repeatedly. And then when it fails, they blame the audience. Why? The audience never wanted it to begin with. You insisted upon it. You insisted upon the audience. You insisted that social commentary and social identity politics be at the front of everything. And it makes me sad. I used to get really mad about it. In fact, I still get mad about it when it pops up, but then I almost immediately just get sad. Because I remember when things used to be better, and how easily it could be better. But the focus is on these things. And it's hard to not believe that it's not deliberate. Especially because many of these people have claimed it's deliberate. A lot of people will criticize many of the channels I just listed and the types of commentary by saying, all you people do is focus on the negative. It's like, well, the negative isn't changing. The creators are the ones focusing on these things that are being perceived as negative. because they keep emphasizing them. They keep preaching to their audience about how racist and sexist and phobic they are over and over and over again. And people say, well, it's not as bad as you guys make it out to be so bad. I'm like, okay, it might be subtle, but it's still there. And every time it pops up, it derails every story it's a part of. A story can start out really, really good, and then all of a sudden, the characters pause to lecture you in some way, shape, or form about how bad you are for believing or having a certain opinion, or having a certain political affiliation, or whatever the case might be, whatever is disagreeable in that regard. And it's so insulting. When you want to tell a good story, you don't want to lecture and insult your audience. You just want to show good character development. You want to tell a good story. And it seems like there's no interest in doing that from the majority of these big studios in Hollywood. Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount. Just, they don't seem to care. And the same with the comics. DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse. You have to go through media with a fine-tooth comb these days to avoid these subjects. It's not as easy as you think. And if you think it's not a big deal, fair enough. You think it's not a big deal. But it's enough of a big deal that people are sick and tired of it. To where all the sorts of channels I just mentioned, and several of which I didn't, they make videos about it daily because there's almost always a story revolving around a new piece of media that is trying to rewrite history. A lot of the times they take old established media and characters and they try to put them into a modern social justice type story, and they rewrite the characters and change them, and then they try to tell you that this is better than that thing that you loved, but it's not. Each time it's terrible. And each time it's ignoring people. And it's oftentimes because they don't like or respect their audience. That's no way to run a business. If I was to run a restaurant, and every time somebody left I spat in their face, and then got upset that they didn't come back, I'd be an idiot. You can't do that, but that's effectively what the people who are creating modern media are doing. They spit in the face of their customers, who all their customers want is for them to respect the source material of stories if they're dealing with classic beloved characters, and to not try to reinvent them for a more modernized take because they're timeless. That's all they want. It doesn't matter if you think that the values or things that they like are outdated. That's what they want. They agree with those values. And you can't change that. If you try to change that, your product is only going to be seen as lesser. All people want is for these characters to be respected and good stories to be told, and it's just not happening. And there's plenty of people who disagree with me, trust me. There's loads of people who disagree with me. And frankly, I don't care if they disagree, they're welcome to. But I'm making this video because I just want to express that I'm just tired of it. I'm really just tired of it, and what's hurting me the most is how it's affecting gaming, which is what this channel is about. I love gaming. And there are so few game companies that haven't fallen into the same trap that Hollywood and comics have fallen into. And it's been getting to me on a almost emotional level, because I look at games again like Star Fox 64 and how brilliant they are. Nintendo has largely not changed from how it's been, and thank goodness for it. As much criticism as Nintendo deserves for a lot of the poor decisions they make, they have been consistent with making a lot of the same quality games that they've made for years. Even more recent ones like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, which I've been very vocal about not liking, I don't like them because they've got some sort of social agenda, because they don't. I don't like them because they often are radically different from what I'm used to, and they make a lot of decisions that I don't personally agree with. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad games by any stretch of the imagination. It just means that personally, I don't like the direction that they've gone with it. Plenty of people praise Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey for the things that they do different, and that's fine. But at least there, my criticism isn't based, again, on a social agenda. It's based on just a difference in design philosophy. But my other complaints for these other gaming studios are a combination of their social agendas, the way that they implement predatory microtransactions, the way that they treat developers, the way these publishers treat developers, and the game design philosophy being trying to sell more for or less for more. It's all very egregious. And quite frankly, it's really depressing because I want to enjoy things outside of Nintendo, but it's getting harder to do unless it's indie stuff. And even then, it's hit or miss in terms of quality because indie don't have all the resources that these AAA do. That's what's mind-boggling to me, is all these AAA game developers have all these resources at their disposal, and yet they still manage to make half-baked games and sell them for full price, promising to add content for later. And even though many of them do it for free, it still shouldn't be that way. It hasn't been that way for years. You used to get complete games, and if they were broken, you just dealt with them being broken. Sonic Adventure, the original Sonic Adventure, was a very broken game, but it was still very playable. There were a lot of glitches, but many of them for me didn't break the game. For some other people they may have. They may have been, too much to overlook. But, every time I go back and play the game, it's a fairly enjoyable experience, and that's more of the subjective nature of gaming to me than anything else. But nowadays, games are so intensely broken, it's very hard to enjoy them. And they're so predatory with the way that they attack the consumers with these microtransactions. And I know you're going to say, oh, you don't have to invest in these microtransactions or loot boxes, but I mean, they're in your face all the time. Look at games like FIFA and Madden. Their entire business model depends on things like loot boxes and microtransactions. The NBA 2K series. And those games have gotten more broken over time to very egregious points, to the point where how did this even pass even the most basic beta test is beyond me, especially NBA 2K. The last 2K was so embarrassingly broken, I couldn't believe it. I've seen broken games over the years, but the last 2K was, oh my goodness. I thought it was a joke how bad it was broken. So, it's all a mess. But there is a silver lining to all of this. There is good news in the midst of all this. The good news is that people are creating. In the gaming scene, it's in indie games. And although they vary in quality, they tend to go with older game design philosophies, so they're not filled with microtransactions and based on the internet. They're based on, again, older concepts and proven things that work and things that people have expressed they continue to want that big companies don't provide. They're based on good things with seasoned developers. And a lot of them don't get the attention that they deserve. Some do. Games like Shovel Knight were terrific. But there are other games that just fly under the radar. I try to do what I can to showcase them here on the channel, but I can't get to them all, and sometimes they fall through the cracks. Sometimes I don't hear about them until a year or several years later. And then the comic book side of things, it's like there's a whole new renaissance happening, an Iron Age as it's been described. People are all of a sudden making comics, and they're great. I'm still trying to pick and choose which ones I want and which ones really appeal to me because, again, it still is a case, I don't want to just blindly support a creator because they're doing something independent. I think that's great. But if I'm not interested in the product, I feel like it's still just kind of a waste of money for me to invest in it. A lot of people are doing stuff to support the creators and they'll never read it, and that's fine, but I don't like doing that. I don't feel like that's fair to the creator. If I don't want it, I'll signal boost it, I'll praise it, but I personally just won't get it because it may not appeal to me. But it's great to see. I mean, there's tons of comics coming out from independent creators, from a lot of YouTubers and content creators, and even older comic book pros that have been kicked out of the industry for one reason or another. For not following the modern sensibilities and modern philosophy, but they still understand what comic books have been for years, and they want to give people something that they want, something more classical. They're not focused on being progressive 24/7. That's the good news. Independent media is being made. Small films are being made, and big films are being made that are focusing on just good storytelling and character development. So not all hope is lost. As tiring and depressing as it tends to be, new stuff is happening. But I think the frustrating part is that it's going to be a slow process, and it's going to be it's going to be a change for a lot of people if they start to embrace these new things that are just starting out. And they might not see the success that the big stuff does. To me, it's okay if they don't see the success that the big stuff does, as long as it's good. If it's good, it'll find an audience in due time. It might take years. But as long as people keep putting stuff out there, keep talking about stuff, you know, reviewing and discussing all this new media, then I think that it'll work out just fine. Sorry, I'm getting a little tired here, folks. It's a bit late, but you know, there is some exciting stuff, but it still doesn't negate the fact that it's sad to see a lot of, you know, established entertainment with characters and media just devolve the way that it is. And it's the best way I can think to put it is that it's devolved. It's not good anymore. And a lot of people aren't willing to accept it. A lot of people are still holding on to it, thinking it's as good as it ever was, but I would sorely disagree. You know, DC Comics and Marvel Comics have declined so much in quality that there's been rumors for a long time, at least on the DC side, that Warner Brothers is going to sell the comics division and do sort of a subcontracting type deal. And at this point, that might be for the better instead of doing it in-house, if it means that there's even a chance that we'll get quality again. Because right now, we're just not getting it. Books just aren't selling. They're collecting dust, and concepts are so... The only way that comics ever get in the news again now is when they do something so absurd, like Gotham High or The New Warriors. That's the only time it gets attention, or I'm Not Starfire. Stuff that is just clearly egotistical, narcissistic, just self-insert nonsense that people don't care about. Where it's plainly obvious what it was created for, and it's an insult to the characters that they invoke. And then you get stuff like Rings of Power and all of these things that just desecrate things with longtime fan bases. They don't make meaningful changes. They tear stuff down constantly. It's very, very frustrating and annoying. Or New Star Trek, how they just completely desecrate the values of original Star Trek series. When I saw some of the violence and language in Picard, for instance, I just was sick to my stomach. And I'm not even a Star Trek fan, really. I'm sort of a passive Star Trek observer, but I saw, you know, I spent time watching the original series and then some of Next Generation. And then I saw clips from Picard, and I just was sick. The vulgarity of it all. Not even just the social justice aspect, which was there, but the vulgarity and just the lack of understanding the universe, and the way that they're portraying the tone of the universe is just, it's nauseating and depressing. I'm sure for some it's rage-inducing, but I'm not that much of a Star Trek fan to really get mad about it, but it does make me feel physically ill. You know, from what I've seen, Star Trek is supposed to be a more hopeful, optimistic view of the future. And the way that they overcome problems is supposed to be, you know, really compelling. But now everything is just dark, depressing, violent, and vulgar. I don't care if that's representative of our real world. You're taking an established universe and you're just crapping all over it. It's insulting. And then when it doesn't do well, they turn around and go, well, I don't understand what was wrong. I thought we were doing something great. Yeah, you're in a bubble. You're in a bubble, and you exclude general audiences and fans. Why should anybody be interested in modern Star Wars, Star Trek, DC, Marvel, established game franchises, any of these things, when they're just going to be perverted? And you're going to have people go, that's not how it used to be. It used to be better. And the truth is it did used to be better. But again, it's been so perverted and so desecrated. There's always hope that it can turn around, but I think the problem is that media in general is so slow to adapt to these things. You know, part of the problem is they sign contracts and they make deals with people years in advance for multi-year books and movies and TV shows. They sign these multi-year deals because they're anticipating automatic success based on the IP that they're using. And so now they're caught in a cycle where they have to go through with different projects because they've already signed a year's worth of them. And they've spent billions of dollars on them. It's a horrible way to do things. I don't understand why they do it that way, but it seems to be how they do it. I could be wrong. I'm not an insider, but that's based on my loose understanding on how they do these contracts out. You know, I think it's a lot quicker for them to do it that way, but they dig themselves a hole, because if they're on a path that people don't jive with or don't connect with, then they're stuck on that path for years until they can renegotiate contracts. So hopefully we're going to end up coming up on a time where it's time to renegotiate, and they choose not to do that. They choose to take a hard look at the philosophies behind both the new series and, you know, reinventing all these old established series, and they go, no, enough is enough. The audience doesn't want this. They've said it over the years. The numbers have tanked. We've lost so much money. Let's go back to doing what people want. It's what needs to happen. And it's happening in small bursts, but it's not happening far enough. And some of these companies are just, they're doubling and tripling down on, you know, the identity and social politics that have infiltrated a lot of this media that people just don't want, by and large. And they don't sell. They just don't sell. So these companies are having to take years of losses, and I think it's going to be interesting to see when it does come time for them to finally make a change, what they will do. Because I'm not entirely sure what that's going to look like. I'm hoping that these companies don't become unsalvageable, that they don't just go under. But they might. If they keep going on this trajectory for at least another decade, then I don't see them surviving, because they're losing the interest. They're not only losing the interest of fans, they're losing the interest of the general public. That the general public doesn't care about. If you portray an established character like Captain Picard as just a weak, feeble, you know, pathetic old man, as opposed to a heroic captain who was willing to take no nonsense from anybody, if you just radically change his character like that out of nowhere, which is what they did with Picard, people are going to notice it. Long-time people are going to notice it. It's part of the nostalgia bait trap, is they use nostalgic characters, but then they radically change it. And they don't pay attention to the source material because they think they can do better. Or they make the excuse that they don't have time. It's incredibly annoying, and it's sad for people who are fans of things. It's hard to be a fan of anything long-term, because they're just going to, you know, take the corpse of that beloved thing. They're going to dig it up and desecrate it. They do it all the time. Rings of Power is the latest example of this, and one of the most egregious I've ever seen. The disrespect towards J.R.R. Tolkien is unfathomable. It is mind-blowing. I haven't seen a single episode of Rings of Power, but I've seen the coverage of it, and I've seen the clips of it, and it's nauseating. The lack of understanding. And again, I'm a passive Lord of the Rings fan. I watched so much Lord of the Rings that I fell out of favor with it, because they were my father's favorite movies for a while, and you would watch them over and over again throughout the course of many years, and it started to wear on me. But I understand, they are still great films. It's like when you eat too much of something that you love and you just get sick of it. That's kind of how my experience was with Lord of the Rings. So it's hard for me to enjoy them now, because I saw it so much, even now years after I've taken a break from seeing them. But I understand the passion behind that franchise, and to see a modern adaptation crap all over it as hard as Rings of Power did it's insulting, it's infuriating, and to see Amazon's response, it's miserable. And there's nothing joyous about the series either, from what I've seen. It's all dark and depressing, and it doesn't understand the lore, and it twists things. And then they try to act like every negative response to the series is all the audience's fault. And it's sad. It's so sad. But again, my point isn't just to point out that everything is bad and horrible and terrible. My point is to also point out that there is good, but it's just going to take a long time for the good to really get itself established. And I believe it will get itself established. I believe independent creators have a voice, and that voice is definitely being heard. It's being supported monetarily. It might not be as big as stuff that's already established, but it could become legendary in its own right if it's treated with care. And I'm very excited for that. So to everybody creating independent media, I say, God bless you. As a Christ follower, God bless you. And I pray that you are successful. in whatever endeavor you undertake to create good media that's divorced of a lot of these modern social politics, and you just want to create something that people can enjoy. God bless you for doing that. It's a good thing. You just want to entertain. You're not trying to stir up controversy. And that I can respect. But it's going to be a long road. And for now, it's going to take a while for me to get to a place where I can really get excited about these things again in a major way. But there is hope. There is hope. So, as I wrap things up here, I just want to finish up with this thought. I think that one day we can see the franchises we love go back to being good and being divorced from social politics and controversy in that manner. I think if we hope and we pray and we stay vigilant, that one day it'll happen. But until that day comes, I'll be here and I'll pop up from time to time to criticize it and to praise what's good. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa with another Koopa commentary, and I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.